morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Happy to have you with us. I, today, am not here live. So this is a pre-recorded show, but it's a pre-recorded show kind of late last week, so still pretty fresh, and I think a lot of fun. We're going to start turning the page here for the 2025 season. We are going to look at some of Georgia's most important players. I think you'll like that. I also have kind of a simple wish for Georgia for the 2025 season. And sometimes, like, the simplest stuff can be the truest, and I think maybe we have an example of that today. So a lot of really good stuff. We are so glad that you are with us for it. We're going to cover it all here right now. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Normally we try to kind of come out of the gate firing on all cylinders here with fresh information right off the top of the show. I do, though, before we get into that, have to give you three quick caveats just for a moment. First, hopefully by now you know that this is a pre-recorded show. It's a good one, but it's a pre-recorded show. We have a little bit of a hybrid of pre-recorded today, pre-recorded tomorrow, and then a mixture of some live stuff for those of you who are live, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. That's going to be really good. We'll tell you more about that here kind of coming up in just a moment. But that is one of those things that a little bit different than normal, and the fact that I am taking some time off from work. So therefore, to give you some fresh content, we did pre-record this late last week. So that, first of all. Here's the second thing, and perhaps even more important. Very, very serious about not doing a whole lot of like bait and switch and telling you one thing and doing something different. We try not to do that here. We try to make good use of your time and not overpromise, underdeliver, and certainly not say we're doing one thing only to then do something different. We're really careful not to do all of that. Slight example of that here today, though, in that the headline, if you came here because the headline says the 6 most important players for Georgia here in 2025. Well, guess what? We are eventually going to get to 6, but today only going to give you 3. Decided it made sense sort of break it up and do the offense here today. We're going to do the defense tomorrow. Kind of doing it that way. Just sort of think it kind of makes some sense to do it that way. So that is the way that's going to go. Connor Riley's going to join us in each of the next 2 days. We're going to do a little bit of a spring preview with him. So we're going to talk offense with him today. Therefore, kind of talking about these guys, the offensive half of this 6, half dozen, if you will, on today's show. And then tomorrow I'll come back and we'll give you 3 guys for the defense. I think that's going to be really fun. The third and the final caveat, and then we're going to dive right into it, is that I was thinking about this as we're, putting the show together and recording the show, that there's actually more than one way you could answer this question. The premise I decided to work from was 6 most important players for Georgia, looking ahead to the spring, as obviously that provides the preview for the upcoming season. And in a roundabout way, you could have answered this question by focusing in on guys who are ready to step up and perhaps take the next step with their development as players and go from being maybe players in a reserve role in 2024 to now being maybe in a starting, if not starring role in 2025. And trust me when I tell you, we will get there at some point this offseason about your breakout guys or your guys who are going to have additional responsibility asked of them here in 2025 than was perhaps asked of them in 2024. I promise you, we'll discuss that. And we could have made this the premise for our 6 most important players this spring. Instead, though, we're going to approach this a different way. And the reason why I have maybe a little bit of a different idea about this right now is, I'm not going to play this clip for you, but we did play it for you a few days ago. It's what Jeffrey Lurie, the Philadelphia Eagles owner, had said as he reflected on his team's world championship and obviously the large number of former Georgia players that kind of helped lead the way for that Lombardi Trophy coming back to Philadelphia. And one of the things that Lurie praised his guys for was, being unselfish and committed to the team and willing, you would think, to sort of forego some individual glory to make the team better. But that really worked for the Philadelphia Eagles this year in the NFL. Former Georgia players clearly contributed to that. And those Georgia players were also very good at providing that same sort of intangible dynamic for UGA back when Georgia was winning national championships in 2021 and 2022. So when we think ahead to Georgia in 2025, because I've got that so heavy in my mind right now, when I'm thinking about Georgia's most important players this spring, I'm thinking about the guys, and for the most part, these are guys also stepping into an expanded role. I'm thinking about guys who will also be able to return Georgia to the sort of selfless team chemistry that seemed to define Georgia when it was at its best. And we'll never know for sure exactly what happened in 2024 for UGA. I don't think those stories will all ever be completely told. But the sense we sort of get is maybe the team chemistry that had once been so great for UGA, maybe not quite perfect this past season. So for many of us, the page turning to 2025 is about how do you get something better from this new Georgia team that we're about to see take shape. So today it's three guys I want to mention on offense. All three of these guys obviously have the potential to be valuable contributors on the field, but the way in which they shape the team with their leadership is perhaps just as important. Let me start with maybe the most important name of all, that is quarterback Gunnar Stockton. The sense that we got watching Georgia when Gunnar came in second half of the SEC championship, and even the playoff loss to Notre Dame, Georgia players seem to like playing for Gunnar Stockton. They seem to want to play with Gunnar Stockton and maybe to a degree even play for Gunnar Stockton. And if we're saying, hey, that same sort of Philly dog leadership, selflessness, commitment to team, foregoing of individual glory that define the Eagles and once define Georgia, if that's going to be present again for Georgia in 2025, then a lot of that's got to come from your quarterback position. And just maybe Gunnar Stockton's the guy that can help get you to that. One of the reasons we know that is because Kirby Smart himself has sort of hinted at this in the past. In fact, just before the Sugar Bowl back in New Orleans, Kirby Smart did give voice to that there is seemingly a aspect to Gunnar Stockton's personality that kind of draws players to him. And some of the best quarterbacks, this is often true for. Perhaps it's also true for Gunnar as well. This is what Kirby Smart said about that, going back to just prior to Gunnar's first start against Notre Dame.
Incredible. I mean, the players believe in Gunnar. They love Gunnar. The juice that he brought and the passion and energy, and he lives with 3 or 4 of those guys, I don't know, Drew and Oscar and some of them, and it was like it gave us an added boost of energy. They were fired up. They were trying to keep him composed, and I thought the offensive staff did a good job helping Gunnar out with the way they called the game. And he did a good job executing. You know, the only mistake he had, and I feel like it was partially on us, is we just didn't get the call in. He got the call in early. He didn't get the call out. He didn't have time to evaluate what they were doing. And if he sees that, he can pick it up and do some things with it. But we were down on the shot clock. And he had the third down. You know, he throws the pick there that could have been costly. But, man, the kid played just tough as nails. I mean, and he hadn't got to play much this year. That's the hardest part is you don't get a chance to play these guys. The Florida State game is probably the most he's played. But can't say enough about his toughness, character, whatever you want to say. The guy's a phenomenal leader. He made some good plays, and I think everybody else rose up around him.
So let me correct myself. That was actually from the post-game of the SEC championship, and Smart says it so clear right there. Hey, toughness, tough as nails, leader, and everybody else rose up around him. That's what you want from your quarterback. And that is the sort of thing that maybe kind of gets Georgia back on the right kind of playing from a team chemistry standpoint here in 2025, the kind of selflessness that can define championship teams that maybe once defined for Georgia. A couple of weeks after that, Smart would go on to say that all the players want to play harder for Gunnar Stockton. Whether that was just sort of a figure of speech or meant to be taken literally, it's the sort of thing that could get Georgia moving in the direction we wanted to go in 2025. And seeing that show up this spring, I think would obviously be pretty valuable. Another offensive player that we'll kind of mention here too, number 2 player on our list, that's going to be running back Nate Frazier. If we would say that Gunnar Stockton, new starting quarterback, most important player, right there next to that may be Nate Frazier. This may be the Nate Frazier show this year as far as the running game is concerned. Obviously, that's a big part of the need for an offensive upgrade for Georgia, sort of a better ground attack. And so, therefore, if Stockton's the most important player, for all the reasons we just mentioned, Nate Frazier may not be too far behind that either. And we believe, on the basis of what Frazier showed as a freshman, stat line kind of in keeping with what a DeAndre Swift's been in the past or Sonny Michel's been in the past, that it is quite possible, and maybe more so for this back than other Georgia running backs in recent memory, it is quite possible that Frazier could be on his way to a special career here at UGA. And the next step in that could be 2025. And his growth in that regard, once again, I think makes him a really important player for Georgia this spring, and certainly as you move towards the fall. And speaking of that growth and that development, I myself had a chance to talk to Nate going back to the Sugar Bowl, and I thought that he was really very open about all the things that he learned about being a better running back during his freshman season. Lessons learned then become experience to share with others now. Let's go back and hear Nate Frazier talking about just that.
Something I learned about being a running back is just a lot more to it than just getting the ball and going and running. Like, it's more of a technique to being a running back. It's little details and small things that you need to know to try to be a better running back. It's just being a running back is quite hard. It's probably one of the hardest positions on the field to play, but yeah, that's what it is, sir.
So last year, Frazier learning from Trevor Etienne, and he talked about that. Now Frazier imparting that wisdom to others and taking those lessons learned and making himself the kind of dynamic playmaker this Georgia offense might be able to lean on here this year. But also, honestly, to spend time with Nate Frazier is to like him. I really didn't know a lot about his personality just because freshmen don't speak Georgia, but hanging out with him for a couple of minutes there in New Orleans, going back to the beginning of the calendar year, I really liked it. Really liked him. And if you want to have a Georgia team that has the right vibe this year, easy to imagine that Nate Frazier will be able to provide that. So on our list today of the three most important offensive players for Georgia this spring, two very obvious names. Quarterback off the top, Gunnar Stockton, Nate Frazier. Almost all of you are going to agree on that. For our third name and sort of the final offensive name here today, let me kind of be a little more outside the box with my thinking. The name I want to mention to you here is Micah Morris. And Morris is a guy that's been really close, I think, a lot at Georgia to getting a lot of playing time. But the battle has been tough. Dylan Fairchild, I think a great football player. Tate Ratledge, when healthy, I think a great football player. And Morris has been in competition with those dudes for playing time. And yet, maybe for whatever reason, at times, the other guys were just slightly ahead of him, at least a little bit. But Micah's stuck around. He's still here. And the sort of toughness that I think has defined Micah as a player, whether he's been on the field or not, all of a sudden now in kind of a starting role, we think, for Georgia this season, he has a chance to put that toughness on display and maybe allow that toughness to also be contagious. The other players on the offensive line can catch it. The rest of the offense, because, listen, in so many ways, the offense powers the offense. The offensive line, I should say, powers the offense. The offense goes as the line goes, both in terms of it's just easier to produce when the offensive line's blocking, but also the spiritual leadership that an offensive line can provide. I think you're going to like having Micah Morris in one of those roles this year. In fact, if we go back to this time a year ago, Kirby Smart gave voice to what made Morris special at the time, and we would believe a year later all of this is even more true. Let's hear Kirby Smart on that.
Micah's a very veteran physical presence. He gives us a toughness and just an identity on offense of contact striking. Guys on defense know when Micah comes up on the double team, Micah pulls, he's coming with bad intentions, and he's good to have in terms of that group creating an identity.
I love that line from Kirby. We made a big deal about this at the time. Bad intentions. Fun way to describe what Micah Morris is all about, and you need some of that, right? If you want the best possible team chemistry, the best possible vibe around this Georgia team, it's not all just, hey, we all love each other and we're happy to be together. There's some of that. Some of it's also, this is how you have bad intentions and go out there and ruin the day of the opponent that you're playing. It sounds like Micah Morris has got that ability. So I think it's going to be a fun spring. I think we got a chance to see a lot of this on display, kind of the picture of what Georgia could look like here. And with guys like Gunnar Stockton and Nate Frazier and a veteran offensive lineman like Micah Morris. Because keep in mind, Morris has been at Georgia since the class of 2021. That means he was on both of Georgia's national championship teams. There aren't a lot of guys left who can say that. And he kind of has that institutional memory of when Georgia was at its best. And perhaps he, as much as anybody, knows how to get Georgia back to that point. So we're thinking about important players in offense. Those are the guys that we're thinking about. And seeing a lot more of them this spring, we think that's going to be very fun indeed. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And boy, so happy to have our friends at Pella as a part of the program, and so happy to have you here too. Now, normally for us, it's live. That's 10 a.m. across all video platforms. We always enjoy all of that. Today, I'm taking a little bit of time to just be kind of away here for a minute, spend some time with my family, kind of catch my breath a little bit. We sort of feel like we kind of need to do that. So that's what we're doing here, giving the folks that work on the show a chance to have a couple of days, hopefully, to sort of catch their breath a little bit too. So we appreciate your patience on all of that. And as I said before, appreciate our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make it all possible. And speaking of our friends at Pella, you've got a lot of really fun stuff going on right now. Your chance to kind of get out and about and see Pella Windows and Door, our friends from Pella, all across the Atlanta market here right now. In fact, they're going to be at the Atlanta Home and Remodeling Show here coming up February 21st to the 23rd. Great chance to kind of catch them. That's coming up, in the very near future here. Your chance to be a part of that. You can meet them, find out why they're just such good, friendly folks, but also kind of put your hand in the windows and sort of feel what makes them different, feel what makes them better, and really get a great sense for why when it's time for you to upgrade, it's time for you to get those Pella windows and doors. Great chance to do that as we sort of head towards the weekend there on that. At the Atlanta Home and Remodeling Show coming up February 21st to the 23rd, really get a great chance to have sort of a face-to-face conversation with someone at Pella. Let them tell you about why their windows and doors really are a perfect upgrade for you. This is going to be a really fun thing coming up February 22nd. That is going to be at the Beer, Bourbon, and Barbecue Festival at Atlantic Station. What a great thing this is going to be coming up there on February 22nd. That's this upcoming Saturday. Get a chance to see them there on that. And I enjoy really three of my favorite things, beer, bourbon, and barbecue. I love all three of those things. And I also love Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You're going to like seeing them there for that. And as NASCAR makes its return to Atlanta this upcoming weekend, too, our friends from Pella are going to be there at the NASCAR Fan Zone, too, on both February 22nd and 23rd, leading into the Am Better Health 400, the return of NASCAR to Atlanta Motor Speedway. All of that going on. So come on out and see them there. Or if you happen to be there, make sure you look for the Pella logo. And make sure you just go up. If you wouldn't mind doing this for me, I'd appreciate it. Go up to them and say, hey, thanks so much for being a part of DawgNation Daily. Really appreciate that. The people at Pella are great folks, and they're going to do good stuff for you. If it's time to upgrade those windows, upgrade those doors, they'll take good care of you. You can find them online, PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond. All right, we're going to get Connor Riley here in a moment. We're going to go beyond with him. John Stinchcomb next week when we're back live again. But for today and tomorrow, we're going to bring on Connor, and we're going to kind of do our own sort of spring preview here. We started off today by talking about some Georgia offensive guys. We'll do more offensive talk with Connor coming up in a moment. And then tomorrow we'll come back and sort of re-rack the same type of thing, but we'll look at the defensive side. I'll give you three more very important players, as I believe, on the Georgia defense. And we'll kind of preview all the position groups on the defensive side with Connor tomorrow. So back-to-back days of Connor on the show. We appreciate him being a part of that with us. But prior to that, let's go around the doghouse here today. And it's poured by Dr. Pepper. We're happy about that. And when I look ahead for Georgia this upcoming fall in one of the most anticipated schedules, because the tough games last year on the road, you flip-flop, you'll play many of those in Athens here this year. Very anticipated schedule. A season that Georgia fans, I think, are also anticipating, too, because they're ready to go out there and maybe take an additional step or two from what happened in 2024. As I look at this 2025 schedule for Georgia, I have a pretty simple wish that I'd like to express. And if this one small, simple thing could come true, then I think that Georgia's chance of winning a national championship increase drastically. I know sometimes we do this. Do we have the schedule? Do we put this on the screen here for a second? So here is my one simple wish for Georgia. Wouldn't it be great if Georgia could be undefeated on October the 1st? Wouldn't that be great? Now, that's a small thing, and that's a long way away from, winning a national championship. You got a whole lot more football still left to play. But if Georgia's standing there undefeated on October 1st, boy, I think the entire tone of the season feels a little bit different. In fact, we kind of know to one degree that it would be different than it was a year ago because Georgia was not undefeated on October 1st. Georgia lost a game in September. Very different feeling for UGA to lose a game that early. And yet the rest of the season, now to its credit, it responded pretty well throughout all of this. But for the rest of the season, Georgia played with a lot more pressure, a lot more back against the wall type mentality, and there was some tension among Georgia fans because of that. And this year, if you could avoid that, I think it sets you up. I think it increases your chance of being where you want to be at the end of the season. Let's talk about why September is so important. Marshall, Austin Peay, obviously you assume that Georgia takes care of business there. But back-to-back games, not back-to-back weeks, 2 games over the course of a 3-week span, at Tennessee on September 13th, off week the week after that, then home versus Alabama on September 27th. If you're telling me that Georgia gets off to a 4-0 start this year with a road win at Tennessee and a big home win against Alabama, something that Kirby Smart has not had a chance to do, play Alabama between the hedges. If you're telling me that's what happens for Georgia, then anything else after the fact, I just think gets a lot easier. Now, nothing's guaranteed. Kentucky was a close game a year ago. We think Auburn, Florida are going to be improved. Ole Miss beat you last year. Texas may be the preseason number 1. So all of these games kind of coming up for Georgia after the fact, none of them are guaranteed. But do you know what the vibe shift would be if Georgia is undefeated 4-0, went into Neyland Stadium where Tennessee is going to be a highly ranked team? Georgia had its issues with road games in 2024. If it wins at Tennessee again and follows that up by beating Alabama, something this program, frankly, kind of needs to do, I just think the mood around the program is entirely different. The enthusiasm of fans, I think, is going to be as high as it's been in certainly recent memory. And all of a sudden now, when you do start playing all those tough games that I mentioned a moment ago, you perhaps have a little more margin at your disposal than you had a year ago. So file this away. I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point in time. It's a small point, but sometimes small, simple points are the most accurate. If you told me right now Georgia on October 1st is 4-0, still undefeated, I'm going to tell you, I like Georgia's chances of being right where we want them to be once that season comes to a close. And that is Around the Doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Now, y'all know I love Dr. Pepper, and I have my entire life. For me now, it's mostly like the Diet Dr. Pepper. That's kind of my favorite. Drink copious amounts of that, to be honest with you. I just love it. It's a great treat to kind of, close out the show, close out the day, a little pick-me-up in the afternoon when I need it. Enjoy my Dr. Pepper. For many of you, though, you like to experiment with these really fun new flavors that Dr. Pepper's all about. Recently they introduced strawberries and cream. That's been a huge hit. Back in the summer, people were loving the creamy coconut. But did you know now Dr. Pepper's got the brand new blackberry flavor that's out there and available for you? And so as you're shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're doing your grocery shopping, try some of the blackberry flavor of Dr. Pepper. People love it. We had a chance to preview this before it hit the shelves. We enjoy it here around Dog Nation. It's a really fun new flavor option from our friends at Dr. Pepper. Now, obviously, we are so proud of our partnership with Dr. Pepper. We're proud of Dr. Pepper's partnership with the rest of college football. We think that's a really cool thing. They've been a huge part of our Dog Nation invasions and things like that. We had a chance to share some time with them back in New Orleans and in Austin, all kinds of great places here this year. So as you're out there doing your shopping, give the blackberry flavor of Dr. Pepper a try. It also comes in Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar, so if you want that, you can get that too if you want that option available to you. Just a lot of really fun flavor offerings from Dr. Pepper. One of the reasons why we're so glad to have them as a part of Around the Doghouse. All right, so before we're done, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look at the rest of the SEC as it gets ready to move towards its spring here upcoming. Big question coming for all the teams in the league. We'll give you that here in a little bit. But for now, focusing on the Georgia offense some more, getting a pre-spring preview of what these dogs might look like coming up in just a couple of weeks. Let's do more of that with our good friend and colleague Connor Riley here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
When you know you're going to be taking a little bit of time off and you kind of want to set the stage for what's going to be coming next when you get back, looking ahead to spring practice, no better person to do that with than Connor Riley, kind enough to join us on both the Monday and Tuesday shows of this week. What we're kind of calling our pre-spring preview. Feels like a good enough time to be able to do that. Connor, kind enough to do that with us here today. So, Connor, I want to look at the offense today. We'll look at the defense tomorrow and try to run through as much of this as quickly as we can. Starting at the quarterback spot, and we just talked a lot about Gunnar Stockton a moment ago, the right vibe that Gunnar has a chance to give Georgia this upcoming season. Let me kind of frame it a different way for you. If I were to ask you this spring, whether it be, practice observations, what we'll eventually see on G-Day, who's more interesting to you, Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi?
Actually, BA, I'm going to take Ryan Puglisi here. With Gunnar Stockton, he's taken so many practice reps. This is going to be his fourth spring with the program. The things that we need to see out of Gunnar, frankly, are only going to be available during game situations. And so I think with Gunnar, and look, maybe this is just because I don't believe that this is going to be a wide open quarterback competition. I think that Gunnar very much has the inside track on this job. The things that Ryan Puglisi can show us in spring, I think, are things that he can tangibly do and improve upon, and I think solidify at this quarterback position. He's got a lot of natural gifts, and from talking to people within the program, he made real strides during the back half of that season, so much so to the point that he had passed Jaden Rashada on the depth chart and was Georgia's backup in that Sugar Bowl game against Notre Dame. And I think more than anything, he needs to be a guy that prepares the right way and shows that he can be ready if and when called upon. So this spring, I'm actually a lot more interested in the development of Ryan Puglisi and the steps that he makes his second year in the program, more so than what Gunnar Stockton does in these scrimmages and in these practices.
The other thing, and I'll say this really quick because I got more I want to hit with you, but we didn't see Puglisi at all during G-Day a year ago. And if you'll notice, anytime he puts out one of these like workout videos, 20 seconds long, people just gravitate towards him, A, because he looks the part of a quarterback, but also because he's a guy that's kind of been in our lives for quite some time, and yet we actually have very little photographic evidence of him playing football. So more of that this spring is just fascinating because this was something this time a year ago because of some injury recovery. We really just didn't see it from him last year.
Right. Didn't play in the spring game last year as he had a knee injury. And so, again, there's a lot to work with here with Ryan Puglisi, a guy Georgia has liked for a long time, committed to Georgia during the 2022 season when Mike Bobo was on staff as an analyst at that point. They've liked what they've had in Puglisi for a long time. And I think that there's a natural interest to sort of see, okay, what does he look like when the lights are turned on? What does he look like when he is working with the first team offense, which I expect him to do so at times during this spring practice and throughout the offseason. So I'm very interested in sort of seeing what steps does Puglisi take, at least in the public eye, because we know he's done some real good work behind the scenes already.
Moving on, do you think that Georgia's second leading rusher in 2025 will be a participant in 2025 spring practice for Georgia?
I do. I know that there's a lot of chatter about them going out and finding a running back. They have to find someone who, similar to going out and adding a quarterback via the transfer portal, just sort of fits a specific role. I think they want Nate Frazier to take charge in this running back room. I think they want him to be the best running back on this team. And so who's coming in here to sort of be a number two running back? And mind you, someone that is probably going to have to split time with Cass Jones as well, given what he brings to this team as a pass catcher and a pass blocker on third down there. So I'm dubious that they're going to be able to find a talented enough player at that running back position to pass several guys on the depth chart. Now, the big thing to monitor is obviously the health of Branson Robinson, Roderick Robinson. What do we see year two out of Chauncey Bowens? How much weight has Dwight Phillips Jr. put on? Is he maybe emerging to an every down running back from more of a gadget player role? And so I think in part just because of the narrow scope of what Georgia is looking for at the running back position, I don't necessarily know that they're going to find that in the transfer portal, whereas they might find help at the edge rusher or outside linebacker position. So I'm going to say Georgia's second leading rusher right now is in fact on this team next season.
When you mentioned the Robinsons, once again, quick follow-up, it seems like to me we kind of have a better sense of where Branson is with his injury recovery than where Roderick is with his injury recovery. Is that a fair statement, or am I wrong about that?
I would say that is correct. I think there's a much better chance that Branson Robinson is able to go throughout spring practice and maybe even potentially play in G-Day if Georgia elects to do so with him than Roderick Robinson. I believe Roderick had an ankle injury that maybe have required surgery, which is why he was not with the team at the Sugar Bowl and is in all likelihood going to miss a large chunk of spring practice as well.
Because as you know, we found out that if you have any kind of medical procedure going on, you can't be anywhere near New Orleans. We did learn that back during the season, I say in jest. I also, a little earlier here today, listing the three most important players of the Georgia offense, I mentioned Micah Morris as one of those three. I'm a big vibes guy when it comes to Micah Morris this year, guy that has memory of Georgia's national championships, a guy who's kind of ready for his time to start. Now, obviously, some of this is related to the fact, too, that, you got Monroe Freeling battling injury and things like that. And other linemen, of course, are going to step up for Georgia, I believe, or certainly have their chance to. But I believe that Morris is just really, really important for UGA, the kind of guy who kind of knows what it felt like when it was really cooking. I think that's a very important player for Georgia. Do you agree with that?
I do. Last remaining player from the 2021 recruiting class taking advantage of his fifth year. And this is a guy who's played a good amount and has started games for this program. But whether it be injury, which he dealt with at times at the end of last season, or being an inconsistent practice player, I think that's why Dylan Fairchild emerged before Micah Morris. I want to see Micah, and I think in this sense it's a big spring for him, become that every down leader on the offensive line, become a guy that is out there playing, giving his best during practice. Because I know he is a talented player, someone that can make a difference. If he's able to make the switch that comes with practice and being a leader in practice, I do think that's going to help this offensive line a good bit. I'm curious of the three players that you mentioned. Did you mention Drew Bobo at all?
No, I didn't, but I could have, and I'll let you make the case for him right now, a guy that valuable experience. He got that a year ago. I think that center is secretly one of the most important positions in football. Of course, they're all important, but secretly important. But give me more on your kind of feeling on Bobo there.
Maybe this is calling my shot a little bit. I actually think Georgia's going to get better center play this season than they did a year ago. Jared Wilson, obviously a very talented player, someone who's going to go, I think, on day 2 of the NFL draft. But he had never played center at a highly competitive level. He transitioned to the position in his time at college and was sort of a work in progress there. And the 12 games he started last year were the first time that he ever started a game at center. Whereas with Drew Bobo, he is a bit more of a natural center. It was not a position change that was made during the course of his college career. He had always sort of been groomed as a center. And I think at center, there's an inherent value that you see of just having a guy that has been groomed and known that he's going to play that position. Trey Hill, a long time ago, very talented offensive lineman for Georgia. So when they moved to center to get him on the field, and that offensive line in 2019 and 2020 when Trey Hill was the center, the offensive line wasn't as dominant as people thought it was going to be, in part because I think Trey Hill was a step back from Lamont Galliard. I think the same was true when going from Jared Wilson to Cedric Van Pran. And while Cedric, maybe other than 2023, was never the most talented center on his offensive line, he was so important to that group in terms of navigating things in the middle and doing things and clearing things out. I think the same might be true for Drew Bobo. And while I believe that Jared Wilson is going to be a more talented NFL offensive lineman than Drew Bobo is, with what Georgia has on this offensive line and what they need to see from it, I think Bobo's presence in the middle of this line and the experience that he has already gotten at center, starting 2 games last year against Auburn and Mississippi State, I think is going to set Georgia up to be better in the interior of their offensive line than necessarily they were a year ago with a very talented Jared Wilson.
All right, let me ask you one more thing today, and then obviously we'll be happy to have you back here on tomorrow to talk about the defense. And this is a little bit of a not fully fleshed out opinion, but when you look at Georgia's pass catchers, I kind of want to see a disruption emerge. In other words, it's easy to imagine, okay, well, transfers come in, they've got experience, they're going to play a lot, but they'll also sort of share time with the next most experienced players from Georgia, and whatever's left over, the young guys will get a chance to have some of that. I think we've sort of seen that version of Georgia before, and as a fan, man, I want to see somebody cut the line. I want to see a disruptor. I want to see a change agent. Like, I want to see a guy be so good you can't keep him off the field, and all of a sudden there's just a fresh new energy. And obviously it's easy to sort of gravitate towards one of the freshmen for that. And, maybe that'll be the case. One of the guys like that's sort of been here for a year and now maybe you're ready to explode in year two. Maybe that's a possibility. And I'm not trying to play favorites here or sort of picking one guy over the other. And I'm happy to have, obviously, some veteran receivers. I'm going to include tight ends in this too. But it'd be really cool if somebody just took something, took some playing time, cut the line, stepped in front of somebody here. I think this Georgia pass-catching crop needs some fresh new energy a little bit. It'd be fun to see that emerge this spring.
So you want that to be Talon Taylor is what you're saying.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Honestly, it'd be a real shame if the veteran players at Georgia, I feel terrible for saying this because I like them too. It'd be a real shame if the sheer number of veteran players at Georgia kept you from getting a chance to let a guy like Talon Taylor maybe do something special for you. I think it would be a shame.
I'll be interested in seeing how quickly he adjusts to playing at Georgia and the physicality that comes with playing at that level. I don't think there are going to be a whole lot of white, slow Illinois safeties playing in the SEC next season there. So I think moving ahead and looking maybe at some of the guys on the roster, I think there were three that jump to mind that are all in their second year with the program. We'll go Sokovia White, Kaylee Mansell's favorite receiver. What does he look like in year two of this program? A guy that a couple of times seemed on the verge of breaking onto the field, but couldn't quite do it. Nitro Tuggle, someone that flirted with the transfer portal in December. What does he look like this year? And what does he do as he becomes, I think, and aims to be a more consistent player in practice? Because we've seen him do some things in the game. And the guy that I'm most interested in, who had some ups and downs during the 2024 season, battled a hand injury that I don't think was heavily reported on. And I do think that impacted how he played during the course of the season. But I'm interested in seeing what we see out of London Humphreys this season. A guy that came in for Vanderbilt, had the big play in the early game against Clemson there, but never really topped that. And so I'm interested now that he's got his feet underneath him. He's played in the SEC for multiple years. You've cleared out some of the Dominic Lovett, the Arian Smith out there. What does he do going into this season for Georgia? I think he's a little bit bigger than he has been in years past, and maybe that allows him to be a bit more of a physical wide receiver for Georgia. I think that he's a guy that I'm interested in seeing what kind of step does he take this season. I don't think he or anyone was necessarily thrilled with the production that they got out of him, but they took Humphreys knowing that he wasn't necessarily going to be the best receiver on last year's team. He was going to be a guy that took some time to really grow and develop, and he does still have 2 years of eligibility remaining. And so I'm very interested in seeing what we see out of London Humphreys this spring because, yes, you bring in Zachariah Branch, you bring back Dylan Bell, maybe Colby Young is out there to go along with Noah Thomas, the transfer as well. I'm interested in seeing what we see from London Humphreys, a guy that's flashed at times, but can he make that step into being a consistent contributor for Georgia this spring?
I love Humphreys as a name for that topic. That's a lot of fun. That's why we have you doing this here today. Kind of great stuff. Come back tomorrow. We'll do it on the defense. Thanks for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Always great to have Connor Riley a part of the show. He does such a good job of, kind of laying the groundwork for what we're going to see this spring. Looking forward to a fun spring here around UGA. Connor does a great job with all of that. We'll have him again tomorrow. We'll look at the defensive side here coming up tomorrow. We'll also get ready to look at some of Georgia's SEC competition, a little deeper examination of them. But prior to that, let's say we're cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And as I'm speaking to you here now, I am not on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation this week. Many of you probably think that I am because when I take time off from work, that's what I typically like to do. Schedule-wise, we're having a hard time kind of making that work. Kids are busy, things like that going on. I'll tell you this, though. I am dying to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation as quickly as I possibly can. At the very least, I know I'm going to be on Utopia of the Seas coming up in April. If I can squeeze in on another one either before that or after that or whenever else, you better believe I'm going to be all about that. And if you haven't experienced the best of Utopia of the Seas, man, I tell you, it'd be a great thing for you to do sometime this year to do that. For our DawgNation cruise, honestly, we're probably sort of getting pretty full there on that now, although maybe you could ask Jessica Slater if there's a last-second opportunity. But if you can't be on our DawgNation cruise this year, we'd love to have you join us in a future year, but we'd also love to have you just check out the best that Royal Caribbean has to offer with its newest ship, at least currently, its newest ship in the fleet, Utopia of the Seas, this Oasis-class vessel. It's gorgeous. All the various neighborhoods make it kind of be that way, whether it's the boardwalk neighborhood, that's sort of the aft of the ship, which is where like the aqua theater is, and especially restaurants and things like that. it's one of the things that sort of sets the Oasis and the Icon class of ships apart is all the little neighborhoods they have that sort of special sections of the ship where you get entertainment, you get food, you get, place to hang out, no shortage of places to get a beverage. It's really what Royal Caribbean's all about. It's one of the reasons why that brand is just red hot right now. And frankly, I'm kind of proud to be a part of it with them. So give them a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email a great travel agent. Her name is Jessica Slater. She was specially selected for us, really recommended to us by Royal Caribbean. You can reach out to her, Jay Slater, at dreamvacations.com. She'll tell you everything you need to know about your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation here in 2025. She'll help you plan the best one for you. Okay, so we started this on Friday. We're going to continue this today and tomorrow. It's kind of a sort of a simple snapshot of the teams in the SEC. We're sort of saying one big question for every SEC team. We did a handful of these on Friday. We'll do some of these here today. Let me start with Texas, the runner-up in the SEC. I think the big question for Texas is this. Is Steve Sarkisian the next head coach without a national championship who might win his first? Now, I said this the other day, and I'm not certainly happy to admit this, but it is probably true, that the last 2 years in college football, the team that got the most attention during the offseason did go on to win the national championship. And we're not proud of that, but we're also not liars. We try to be fair and balanced and as honest as we can. A lot of hype for Michigan. They won the national title. This past year, a lot of hype for Ohio State. They won the national title. The most hyped team of this offseason is going to be Texas. Does Texas then prove that hype was worthy and warranted by winning a national championship? Obviously, we'd say that Georgia is the program that most stands in the way there. But, given the fact that the media sort of kind of gotten it right with the team that it's fallen in love with the last couple of off seasons, you at least have to wonder if that's true for Texas. Moving on to Mississippi State, and if Texas is maybe the most interesting team we could talk about, Mississippi State is the least interesting. And I guess, and I don't mean to be snarky here, Georgia obviously does play Mississippi State here. The thing that I would find to be interesting is, and Georgia will have to go to Starkville this year, is anything happening for Mississippi State that causes us to notice them at all? Like they are, I would say, even more so than Vanderbilt. They are the most non-distinct, and it's not meant to be snarky. I'm not trying to trash them. There's just very little of note about Mississippi State. They don't really have anything sort of capture attention, your imagination. Luke Kromenhoek transferring to there. I thought that was the former Florida State quarterback, a in-state quarterback here of note as a recruit. That's something at least. But Mississippi State really hasn't done anything to get on anyone's radar at all. Is there something that happens this year that causes Mississippi State to have some sort of brand awareness for itself? We would say right now that's pretty non-existent. Moving on to Tennessee. I think Tennessee, look, I'm obviously a Georgia fan and a Georgia partisan. Most of what we do around here is sort of done from a pro-Georgia perspective. But to me, though, I also love the SEC as well. And putting my fandom for Georgia aside and just trying to put my sort of objective analyst hat on from the SEC from a moment, I think Tennessee is a fascinating team. Because on the one hand, Tennessee broke through and got to a college football playoff last year. It's a real accomplishment. On the other hand, they got completely demolished in that playoff game against Ohio State. And it's year 3 coming up for Nico Iamaleava, the starting quarterback for the Vols. And thus far, despite the fact that Nico is one of the most, scrutinized the wrong word, he's got almost more attention than almost any other quarterback here in this sort of NIL era that we've been in. Supposedly came to Tennessee for millions of dollars. But Nico is about average when it comes to an SEC quarterback, as far as I can tell. Played very little in his first year. And like I said, last year he was out there. He didn't hurt Tennessee. He didn't cost him a lot of games. I'm not really quite so sure how many games that Nico himself actually led Tennessee to a win to. This was a running game, defensive-led team last year. Nico just happened to be their starting quarterback. But gosh, if Tennessee is going to take the next step and actually have a chance to win the SEC and not just make the playoff, but advance in the playoff, you need a lot more from Nico Iamaleava. And will he be able to kind of take that step? Of all the so-called big questions we're asking about SEC teams here, I don't know if there's any more obvious and important question than what does Nico do for Tennessee? I think that's fascinating. One big question for Kentucky here for a moment. And once again, not trying to be snarky, but just trying to be honest. Does Mark Stoops even still want to coach this team? Because you really get the sense that the vibe around Kentucky are not good at all. And we've had relatively stable time when it comes to SEC coaches. Stoops obviously been employed for a very long time there in Lexington. But if you're making your list of coaches, whether it's by his own doing or their doing or somebody's doing, if you're making your list of the coaches most likely not to still be employed in 2026, Stoops has got to be near the top of the list. Now, that may not be a wise thing. Honestly, Kentucky's a hard place to win. It could be that Mark Stoops has one more at Kentucky than they have a right to win with any other coach. That's quite possible. But you get the impression that Kentucky fans are tired of him, that Stoops is sort of tired of them, and that Stoops may just be sort of tired of this job. You just kind of wonder, how much does he even still want to be there? And then finally for today, I'll give you this. As it relates to Oklahoma, it's sort of a coaching-related question again, is there a coach on a hotter seat right now than Brent Venables? Seems perhaps that there isn't. That Venables is one of the great defensive coordinators in recent college football history. He has had a hard time distinguishing himself, though, as a head coach. And, boy, life in the SEC doesn't make that any easier. Once again, on the list of coaches that could be fired, you got to imagine that Venables is perhaps one of those guys. So we'll be watching that closely, too. We'll also make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. As we wrap up here today, no golden shoe for you. I will tell you, though, this is a little bit of a tease, preview of something upcoming. Our buddy $1 Million Eddie, he's got something pretty fun planned here pretty soon. And it kind of relates to something we've talked about here recently. So stick with me here on this. $1 Million Eddie's got a fun announcement he's going to be making very, very soon in the program. Perhaps putting that $1 million bill to good use. We'll find out more about that here in the next few days, I believe. Not too long from now anyway. So Eddie's got you covered on that. Lousy, stinking Gators. Of course, Eddie loves to enjoy their misery. About 1,563 days. That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. Always tricky to do the math on one of these pre-recorded shows, but I believe we have that right. Either way, that's our Gator Hater Updater. Of course, so happy to have all of you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Thank you so much for your time, and we will look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Of course, by now, we've done this for a good number of years. You know the drill. I am not able to take live comments with you here today, but I will tell you this. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there will be live commentary. Y'all seem to like that. So different people, different days, but there will be some live commentary. I think you'll have your chance to enjoy that. I'm sure right now you're sort of at each other's throats in the comment section. You're probably making fun of me for something, which is no problem as far as I'm concerned. But we will get back to a live cool down again Wednesday. I'll be back in my normal spot live next Monday, pre-recorded again tomorrow. So that's kind of the story here on that. Big thanks to our friends at R.S. Andrews who make this portion of the show possible, whether I'm here or not. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Story after story, R.S. Andrews have been putting smiles on people's faces. And if you've got an emergency related to your plumbing or your electrical systems or your heating, air, something like that, hey, if you've got an emergency as it relates to that, our friends at R.S. Andrews, they want to kind of get it fixed for you. That's why they're putting smiles on faces, because people love it when that stuff gets taken care of. So if your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. But you need to find them online, rsandrews.com. Okay, hope you have a great day. See you back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to